Talk about the IR management handbook here. So, a computer security incident is when something bad happens on your computer's network, someone attacks it, and they're trying to cause harm. There are a lot of different kinds. The most common one people think of is data theft, stealing social security numbers or credit card numbers, but they can also directly steal money, and extortion is now extremely common. The most common attack these days seems to be ransomware as a double threat. They encrypt your files and demand money to let you back in them, and they also steal your files and demand more money not to leak them. They call it double attack. And very common, happening to almost everybody, and unfortunately, the defenses are very weak. The best defense is to have a really efficient backup system so you can restore your data, but that doesn't protect you from the theft component. And many antivirus type companies are selling products claiming they will stop this, but in practice, they don't seem to stop it very well. This is why defense is much harder than attack, because in order to attack, you just need to find a weakness and exploit it. But in order to defend your company, you have to find every weakness and eliminate it. And somewhere in your company, there is somebody with a default password or an old version of something running.
Hacking or something similar.
Hacking? Hashing?
Hacking, yes, hacking in the internet or something similar. Hacking the password.
Well, yes, that's right. That's the problem. I mean, you have to close all the weak spots, and that turns out to be extremely difficult to do. All right, so the goal of an instant response is to figure out how someone got in, determine what tools they used, what damage they did, and then figure out how to stop the attack and how to restore your systems to functionality. This is what you're trying to do. It's very much like what happens after an airplane crash. These guys come in, they go through the pieces, figure out what happened and how to prevent this from happening again. So it involves a lot of people. You've got legal teams, lawyers telling you what your legal obligations are and your compliance obligations. If you're a regulated industry, which many of them are, then you must meet certain standards. Human resources are important. When we had a fake security incident by a corrupt official at this college a few years ago, he did not tell anybody anything, but went straight to the Chronicle to get his name in the paper. So people read in the paper there was a virus at the college, and all the people were calling around randomly, like calling me, saying, is it safe to come to work? Is it safe to use my machine? And I didn't know anything. Nobody knew anything. And that's not what you do. That's why you have human resources in the loop. You have to communicate to your staff and tell them what happened and what they should do about it. They all will want to know, do I need to change my password? Do I need to get a new credit card? Very sensible questions. You have to tell them what the consequences are. And of course, your network infrastructure team is involved in containing and responding to the incident. And your business managers and desktop IC support, all these people are involved in attempting to fix it, and they should all be told how to answer questions from the staff and your customers and the public at large. They will all be asking questions about how bad is it, how does it affect me? So you have an incident manager, and this person has to be powerful in the company because they have to be able to make difficult decisions like allocating resources and shutting down parts of the network and changing your business processes that are going to cost money. So they have to be powerful enough to allocate resources in the company. And your remediation team leader will be the member of the IT staff, which is going to be doing the technical things like scanning the machines, finding the malware, cleaning it off, and making upgrades, like adding two-factor authentication or a better firewall or something to stop it from happening again. You got a lot of other teams involved, like I mentioned, from public relations, human resources, compliance officers. All these are common compliance. PCI if you handle credit cards, HIPAA if you handle medical data, FISMA. I forget what that is. I know FERPA is the one if you're an educational institution, and NERC is if you're an energy company, but there are special regulations for each type of business and special compliance standards you have to meet. So PCI is famous. This is the industry self-regulation of the credit card companies, Visa and MasterCard and others, and they require you to protect your network in various ways. And if you handle a lot of credit card numbers, they require you to have an outside audit every year to verify that you are handling the cards and information in a correct way. And one reminder here is that whenever you're dealing with an outside agency, they have different priorities than preserving your company. This is always an issue, and they may not care how much you lose compared to them maintaining the integrity of their policy. Just like when you call the police, they may, investigate and find things you'd rather they didn't find. You now have an external agency involved, but if you're in a regulated industry, that's the case. You are being overseen by one of these. The same thing's true of a college. We're overseen not only by the requirement to meet FERPA requirements, but also we are audited every 3 years for compliance with a committee that comes down to see if the college is meeting certain standards, and if you don't, then they won't let you take financial aid from the government anymore. So, you're a regulated industry just like many others. So, many companies have to go outside their company to get incident response talent. This is reasonable. If you have a small company, you probably don't have all these people on staff all the time. So you may want to bring in someone outside, and the most common people the big companies bring in is Mandiant, founded by Mandia, who wrote this textbook, and all in response to the 2010 hack of Google, which was an earthquake event in information security that convinced every company that they are being hacked, that defense measures are not good enough, and they have to have instant response. So they bring in a consultant very often to handle this. So you look for people with training, with experience, just like anything else. I wonder, now you probably have heard that programmers are finding it very difficult to find jobs because people now believe that AI programming assistants can replace a lot of your staff, and a lot of other information-related jobs are not hiring because they think they can do it with AI. I'm not sure to what extent people think they can do incident response with AI. I would imagine that that will not be replaced by AIs quickly, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so you got to find people that have experience would be nice, and knowledge of the applications you use at your company would be very useful. So your team members are analytical and a good communicator. This is the modern problem. Now, there's been a problem in technology from the beginning where the technical experts are usually very bad at communication. They don't dress right. They don't know how to talk to the boss. They're disrespectful. They think people are stupid because they're not technical. I used to be this guy. They would hide me in the back room and prevent me from seeing the customers because I couldn't know how to talk to the clients. And this is no longer acceptable. They had to put up with this in the early days of IT because they needed IT skills and they would accept all the personality defects of these people. Now they increasingly want you to have both, the ability to be technical and the ability to be polite and deal with business managers and clients and such. That would be best. All right, anyway, so, and of course there's industry certifications out there. There are a lot of them. I don't know of any that apply specifically to incident response, but there's Microsoft networking, Linux networking certifications, Network Plus security certifications like CISSP. There's a ton of them. And that's one way you hire people based on having these certifications. Anyway, let's take a look at a Kahoot. This is an online quiz that is just extra credit. You don't have to do it, but it helps prevent people from falling asleep during the lecture so much. And it was popular at a high school training event. I learned this from the Air Force. The Air Force has a high school cybersecurity event, and they use these things, and I thought they were very nice, so I added them to my courses. So this is chapter 2, and there we go. All right. So go to that, I guess, and any device you have, and put in that number. If you want to participate in this, a phone will work. Students tell me there's even a Kahoot app, but a browser will work too. What's that? Have to do what to the phone? Let me turn this off. You can do it on a phone, but you just have to be on the internet. You should join the CCSF network. Yeah, let's see what you got. All right. Yeah, so You should be able to join. Yeah, just go to the home page. You don't need to record this to re-record.
Homepage, where should
Yeah,
we go?
so just open the browser like Chrome.
This one?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see if you're on the internet. Looks like you are. Yeah, so just go to kahoot.it.
Kahoot.it.
Yeah, put it in there. That should do it. I think that's a mixture junk. Just type in there kahoot.it. And just enter.
This one?
Yeah, try that.
Yeah, this one. This one.
Yeah, try one of them, yeah. Yeah, that's it, click that.
Here?
Yeah. Yeah, that gets you in.
Okay.
And now you
Okay,
put in
so-
that number and put in a name. Good. Good. All right. All right. Okay, that'll do. All right. All right, well, that may be all we're getting today. Let's see. Did you get in? Okay, good. All right. All right, so which of these is not a computer security incident? Yeah, the last one is the one that's not because it was prevented. Someone attempted to do something bad, but you caught them. So there's not an incident. These others are serious and require investigation. If your records are on a public server, you now need to decide, did somebody in fact get them? And even the exposure itself probably violates your compliance rules. This is not an incident. This is an attempted problem which was prevented. All right. All right, which of these is not usually a goal of incident response? All right, and that's the one you usually don't care about. I was at a Secret Service meeting. I'm in the High-Tech Crime Investigators Association, which is part of the Secret Service, and they have very good meetings. And they had a guy on stage presenting it. He said, normally you don't care who attacked you. It doesn't matter to you. You just want to protect your company. And the police and law enforcement people said, wait a minute, we care. And I said, well, you guys care because you can do something about it. Most of us, you know, we don't care if it's foreigners or Americans or the Chinese or anybody. We've got to just protect our network.
No, Koreans.
But the police, of course, care. They might actually want to go punish somebody. Yeah, what's that?
Police officer care about that.
Yeah. The police and the FBI, they care because they can do something about it. But a normal company, I can't do anything to them. So I don't really care who you are. I just want to know how you got in and block it. Anyway, all right. All right, so what's the most important ability of the incident manager? The most important thing is authority in the company. They have to have the ability to expend resources on the incident. So they have to be important. This is something you'll see a lot if you get your CISSP certification too. One thing they warn you is it is very common for a low-level employee of the company to try to change something about the security, and you can't do that. You need to get buy-in from someone high in the company because it's expensive to make changes. So nobody low in the company can make change. What you have to do is advocate with C-level executives and get someone to agree with you. Unless it comes from the top, it won't work. And this is a very common mistake people make at companies. There's a disgruntled low-level employee that has a security problem they're complaining about, and they're not effective at convincing the C-level, and they continue to make trouble. And what they tell you is, don't try to do anything if you do not have support from management. It will not succeed. It will just make everybody hate you. Anyway, all right. And which stakeholder may have other goals more important to them than your company's recovery? Now, that's the thing. The external compliance agencies like PCI may not care about your company very much. They just want to maintain their other goals, like the integrity of their certification. So it's an issue in dealing with them. To some extent, they are a hazard to your company. Same thing is true of the college. We had a corrupt bunch of external auditors try to shut down this college for bad reasons, and we had to go to court and defend them, and there's a big legal battle and all that. The external agencies are sometimes not your friends. Anyway. Record the winners here. Sophia, I've got these others may not be real names. If you use a fake name and you want to get your points, you'll have to eventually tell me who you really are. Anyway, all right. So let's go on here, and let me check online to see if there's comments in the Twitch stream. Just morning. Okay, good. Good morning. All right. So the instant response process. Here's the main activities: their initial response, investigation, and remediation. So your initial response. You have to decide if there really is an incident. You have to find readily available data, and you're trying to determine the potential impact. This is really important. For example, someone can come and tell you that they can't read their email, and it might just be a defect of one machine. It might be the whole server is down. It might be a variety of things. And so the first thing is to decide how big is the problem. So interview the person who reported the incident. Very often people think they're being hacked, but they aren't. Something simpler is wrong, like a hardware problem on their machine. Interview your IT staff, business unit people, look at logs. The main thing here is to find whatever data you can find quickly, because you're trying to decide, in general terms, what's going on. Is this really a security incident, or is it just a maintenance issue? Or some kind of mistake? So you're trying to learn what happened, how it happened, and possibly who was responsible, mainly if it's someone on your own staff. If it's somebody on your own staff did something like change a server setting or put on an update and cause a problem. What a lot of people will do is rush to just re-imaging servers to make it work again. That's what you do for a normal problem like a hardware failure. But if you really are under attack, this generally just hides the evidence and doesn't stop the attack. So you have your initial leads, and then you're going to create indicators of compromise. After you decide you have been attacked, you're going to find information that can be used to determine which machines are infected. Then you deploy them to find those infected machines. Then you examine the infected machines more, collect evidence, and probably find more indicators of compromise, and you go around this loop, hunting, finding more and more information, and finding more and more evidence about what was done. Like I mentioned, the most common mistake people make is they just re-image the servers and back up and pretend it's all fine. And this is like you go in your house and you see a cockroach on the floor, you step on it and say, there, the problem is fixed. well, there's a problem somewhere else that hasn't been fixed, and they will just come back. And that's usually the case here. By the time you notice an incident, very often the attackers have spread and taken over several machines, so just fixing one or two machines doesn't fix it. In fact, it just warns them, and they dig in deeper. So you have to get more complete information and then plan a effective action that will kick them out entirely, fixing all their ways in. So you get your initial leads, not necessarily only using malware, especially these days. A lot of attackers have learned to use legitimate tools instead of malware to avoid setting off antivirus warnings. There's plenty of legitimate system maintenance tools from Microsoft and other companies you can use to run processes on a machine. And so look for actionable information that helps you determine what's going on. So indicators of compromise are things you can measure easily and quickly that tell you whether a machine is part of the incident. So things like file names, events in the event log, persistence mechanisms like registry keys, things like network traffic to certain IP addresses, and other malware signatures is something you can easily determine whether one machine has this or not. And so there are even some attempts to make a standard format for indicators of compromise from a few different companies. None of them have really caught on too much. But the point is, one way or another, you have to have the information here where it tells you what you have. So this is showing a file item and gives you a file name, kernel32.dil. These looks like these are all just file names. So that's one possibility, although those are pretty common file names, so I'm not so sure of that. Anyway, so once you find them, then you'll use some kind of platform to scan your network to see which machines have this indicator of compromise. And you can write scripts in Microsoft Visual Basic or other languages, but usually you use a pre-made platform. And what we're going to use in this class is Velociraptor, which is a free, very powerful product. So snort rules for network signatures are the standard. Snort was the first intrusion detection system that would analyze network traffic for malicious activity, and it became the standard to write down the rule. Anyway, once you deploy your indicators of compromise, you find hits. These are machines that do have the indicators of compromise, and therefore are presumably part of the attack. And then you look to make sure it's really true. Depending on how accurate your indicators of compromise are, they might have false positives. They might appear on machines that are not part of the attack because your indicators of compromise are not specific enough. So you validate, make sure it's relevant. You categorize it in some category like backdoor installed, SQL injection, data theft, and then decide a priority. What priority you have investigating these machines. And typically you'd want to use, your highest priority would be a machine that appears to have a new problem. So, because typically bad guys will get in with one attack and then they'll install malware and then they'll install more malware and then they'll pivot to other systems and compromise it in other ways. There's stages to the attack. So you'll typically find one problem and then another problem and another. So you want to preserve the evidence. You can collect evidence a variety of ways. You can take down the machine and image the hard drive. Forensics started for police investigations of crime on computers, and then the standard was you always wanted to get all the information on the hard drive and analyze it because you're trying to find something, analyzing something like kidnapping. But in incident response, speed is more important than completeness. Taking all the evidence of a whole hard drive might take you a week to analyze, and that's probably a waste of time. What you'd rather do is get just something smaller, like a list of the files on the machine or the registry keys, and work with that as much as possible. That's why you'll see Velociraptor is the main tool here, and you do not normally image the whole machine. Instead, you ask certain questions. List all the files in the directory, list all the running processes, list all the network connections. Things like that are usually more effective for instant response. So that's a live response. This is the most common method. You run a script on the machine that may be infected and get information from it. List of processes, network connections, log files, things like that. This, by the way, is not a perfect process at all. When I first heard of this, I rebelled because taking a machine that has been infected and running a process on that machine to gather data is a sloppy thing to do. You're modifying the machine while investigating it, and you're trusting the machine to do the job right when it might be infected and the malware might be stopping it from taking effect properly. So that is a thing to understand. None of your investigation processes are perfect, but you always start with whatever's easiest, and you only move to more difficult processes when you have to, because usually the simple, easy technique is good enough. And speed matters. All the time that you are not succeeding in analyzing it, the bad guys are doing harm to your network, digging in deeper, stealing more stuff. So you don't want to try to be perfect. You want to try to do something quick and effective. All right, you can get memory. You can harvest the memory. This will show you running processes and data sitting in memory. Again, analyzing the entire RAM is also a big file you'd have to spend a long time analyzing, and normally you don't bother. You normally get something more specific, like just a list of the running processes, not the full memory of every process. And we'll do some of this in the projects. You'll see where you harvest the memory from just one process to find out if it's part of the infection. And a forensic disk image is the original classic forensic method where you image the entire hard disk, which is something like 500 gigabytes, and then you make a copy of it and analyze it with software like EnCase or FTK, and typically spend days or weeks analyzing it. And that you would only do as part of a lengthy investigation. You would typically try to avoid this as much as possible in incident response. But you may have to do it if you find one machine that has actually been used to do something like steal money from a bank, and you really want to have evidence to take to court to prove who did it. Then you would want to take this image and go through all that. But that would probably take place after incident response, because that would take too long. All right, so you can analyze malware. You can do live response, normally what you do, where you just run a script of some kind and collect data from the running system. And then, of course, you could do the forensic examination on a whole disk image or a whole memory image, but that could be a waste of time. All right. And so remediation, once you're done finding new events, this is a standard cycle for forensic investigation. You investigate something, you find some indicators of compromise, you use those to find more machines to investigate, and then you find more indicators of compromise, and at some point you no longer find anything new. You just keep seeing things you've seen before. That's when you stop. You might not have found everything, but you've done all the good you can do with your procedures, and so then you're ready to clean up the system with remediation. So let's look at another Kahoot here. I'm going to check to see if there's more comments. All right. Oh, good. A name. That's good to know. I'll make a note of that. Thanks for telling me. That goes here. Good. The copy didn't work. Happens a lot in browsers. The key press for copy doesn't work. There we go. Good. All right. Let's try another Kahoot. This would be 2B. All right. All we're getting. We only had 4 the first time. I'll wait a few seconds to see if anybody else is coming. Aha. Good. All right. All right, so which phase would include re-imaging the servers? That's remediation. Of course, you're destroying evidence then. I mean, that's what you do when you're all done, and you're just trying to restore things back to function. All right. All right, which phase includes a forensic analysis of disk images? Yeah, that's clearly part of the investigation. Like I say, it's a very hard work. It's a lot of work, and you try to avoid it, but sometimes you really have to do that. All right, which phase includes interviewing the person who reported the incident? That's your initial response, of course, when you're first gathering evidence to try to decide what's going on. Is this really an incident at all? If it is, what type of incident is it? All right, and what phase includes deploying IOCs? Well, that's the investigation part. You're finding out which machines are compromised. All right, there we go. All right. All right, so let's carry on here. So here's 3 activities you do during incident response: posturing, tactical, and strategic. Posturing is part of remediation where you're trying to prepare yourself to correctly handle an incident. So you're just designating responsibilities, scheduling resources, and so on. You're preparing to respond to an incident here. It's more likely to be successful in remediating. For example, I found I did a lot of investigation of Android apps and websites, and I found a Canadian developer who was deploying websites to all kinds of businesses, and they all had SQL injection vulnerabilities. And I also noticed he did not have a version number anywhere. So he was making these systems by hand, and he didn't have any update process or version number, so there was no way for him to easily fix them. And that's something posturing would do. You posture by having an update process, some way to deploy a patch, some way to improve things easily. You'd be a lot better off if you prepared in advance to be able to update things. If you didn't prepare for that, then when it's time to fix something, you have a lot more work to do. And also deploying a product like Splunk, where you forward all the logs to one system so you can analyze them in one place, is far better than having to hunt and go to individual systems and gather the evidence. All right. So then there's tactical things you do to address the current incident, like changing passwords, rebuilding systems, blocking IP addresses, and so on. These are things you will do that are specific to the current incident to try to reduce the harm and begin to recover from it. And then long-term improvements. After you're done stopping the current incident and dealing with the consequences and restoring things back to normal, you should then consider how you're going to prevent this in the future. And usually, the number one thing is switching to two-factor authentication. Most incidents involve phishing or stolen passwords, and if you go to two-factor authentication, that's the best way to stop that. But it's a lot of work and very expensive, and most companies are sloppy, and they don't really move to 100% two-factor authentication. They just move some of the accounts, and then they get hacked through the remaining accounts that aren't using two-factor. It tends to happen. So you track information, share it with the team. You're going to have some way to keep track of things like a numbering and naming system, so you have records of the incidents and what you did, because future incidents will probably be informed by that. In fact, they might be part of it. One thing that is extremely common is you have an incident, you respond, but your response is not successful, and the bad guys are still in there. You did not find all their remote control, and they just come back. So future incident is caused by the failure to completely clean off a previous incident. This happens a lot. All right, so you want to record the evidence collected, the affected systems, files of interest, and if you think you may go to court and prosecute somebody, then you'll want chain of custody. So that evidence will be good in court. Most companies don't bother with this. They don't care. They have no interest in going to court. They don't imagine they will ever find an outside attacker. And if somebody inside the company is involved, you don't need to go to court either. You can just fire them or demote them or cut their pay or something. Only Steve Jobs kept on suing and prosecuting his own employees, which is unnecessarily vindictive and considered sort of crazy. I mean, you have control of your employees. You could just fire them. You don't usually need to go to court. Anyway, but you know, there may be cases where you would, where they actually steal a large amount of money and you want to prosecute them. But normally, just firing them or something is sufficient punishment. All right, then you want to record what the attacker did, what indicators of compromise you found, what accounts were compromised, and a list of the ongoing tasks. This is why, when I found out about 4 months ago that Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol has a flaw that on Windows machines that use cloud identities, like modern systems, they're using Windows 11 or the Server 2025, if you change your password in the cloud, it does not take effect on the machine. The people I talked to that were working in instant response were horrified by this, because this is the number one thing they do, is find out which accounts are compromised and change the password. And now they say, there, we kicked that guy out. But in Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol, frequently the old password will still work after a password change, which is a really serious problem. And right now, Microsoft is pretending this doesn't matter. And I think it will take some time to humiliate them into admitting they need to fix that. Anyway, and so you have reports. Your team will have a report inside your company. If you're an outside contractor, you'll have a report. That's your main product. A report explaining what we found, what we did, what recommendations we have. And this is something you have to do, and you have to think about this all the time. If you do the contests here, this pen testing contest in particular, you will practice writing reports, and you'll learn that when you're doing work, you keep records, like screenshots of what tools put out to put in your report. Because your report is like a scientific paper. It should explain exactly what you did so somebody else can repeat that and understand it. This is a huge problem with people that report vulnerabilities to companies. They typically don't get paid and don't get rewarded in any way because they can't communicate effectively. There was a guy that found a vulnerability in Facebook where he could go in anybody's account, and he notified Facebook, and they didn't respond, so he finally hacked Zuckerberg's wall and put stuff in Zuckerberg's account. And then they said, well, now you committed a crime and you violated the rules, so we certainly won't pay you. And he said, you guys are rotten bums. I found it and I told you and you didn't listen. And he posted the email he sent. And I looked at it and I couldn't understand it at all. This is what tends to happen. It was just abusive, insulting, full of technical terms that I couldn't understand, complicated code that I couldn't quite follow. That's what happens. If you don't communicate effectively, it doesn't work. People can't understand you. So learning to write a good report that can be understood is very important. And a very good place to go for examples is Microsoft security bulletins. Microsoft security alerts are very well written. They start with an executive summary without any technical terms that says, what is the problem, how dangerous is it, what machines are in, what type of software is affected, and what do you have to do. Then it has more technical information and like an appendix with more and more technical information, because a normal human like the boss needs to be able to look at it and in just 5 minutes know, do I care or not? What's affected? Am I using that? Does it matter? How bad would it be? How hard is it to fix? That's all they want to know. And that you don't have to get complicated or technical about that. That's the executive summary. All right, anyway, let's take a look at another Kahoot, which is 2C. All right. So what's the easiest and most common way to collect data? Live response. You run a script on it to tell it some simple thing, like list all the running processes or list all the network connections. That's usually the most effective way to get useful information quickly. All right, which phase would include changing passwords? Yeah, that's tactical. That's how you stop the current problem, the current attacker from coming in. It's not posturing because it's not a way you prepare before an incident, and it's not strategic. It's not a way you long-term prevent a future incident. It's the way you deal with an immediate incident. It's the most common thing, a password reset. They send an email to everybody. That solves the immediate problem, but it doesn't really prevent future problems by itself. Because however they stole the passwords this time, just changing passwords doesn't prevent them from stealing passwords that way again later. Which phase includes designating responsibilities? That's posturing, and that's why if you go to a security conference like Black Hat, they will have training events where they have a tabletop exercise where executives of the company just sit around and they talk about an incident. Suppose something comes in, you get this report, because they practice figuring out who's in charge and who communicates with who, because in the heat of an incident, there's often great confusion. Nobody knows who's in charge, who to tell, and that's why just having your roles defined, like who should do what and who they should ask for guidance, is real important. This is why the military has this plan, right? They know who the boss is, and they know if that guy is unavailable. They know who takes over. They have a good chain of command. Most companies don't have that, and they need that to respond to an incident. All right, so who should not receive periodic reports of an IR investigation? Obviously the news media. I mean, that's what happened. Like I mentioned, it happened at this college. The guy went straight to the press and didn't show the internal people, and that is the wrong thing to do. What you do is you resolve it internally until you know what you want to say. Then you go through your legal department and your PR department, and you make a carefully crafted statement that goes to the press. You don't go outside the company until you are ready. And that has to pass through your legal team and your PR team, to make sure you're saying the right thing that's not going to get you in trouble. And certainly telling them when you aren't even done yet, like partway through an investigation, things that might be wrong, that is almost always the wrong thing to do. Wait until you actually know what you want to say. All right. Good. All right. Well, that's all for the lecture. Now all I want to do is demonstrate Splunk projects. So let's take a 10-minute break and pick up at 11:10, and then I'll just demonstrate the next Splunk project. So I'm going to stop this recording.